Not at all, and it didn't help them a couple of weeks ago. They just got beat by the Steelers at home a few weeks back in a slobber knocker of a game. But with D'Angelo Williams having those injuries, I think that takes away an important part of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Again, they can air the ball out with the best of them, but you got to keep defenses honest in the NFL. And if you can't run the football effectively, you can't keep those pass rushers. You can't keep Geno Atkins and company off of Big Ben. And Big Ben, not as mobile as he used to be. He can't shrug off those tacklers like he used to. He can't slide off to the side and make plays off the field like he used to. I think injuries are catching up with him. I think age is keeping up with him or starting to catch up with him. So my prediction, I'm going Cincinnati Bengals at home. I'm picking Marvin Lewis to end the streak 24-20.
Wow, bold prediction. Very, very bold prediction, man.
How's that a bold prediction when Cincinnati won the division?
Well, Cincinnati, they have A.J. McCarron. Let's be honest, man. He's making his first career start in the playoffs. That's a huge deal. I know he had major success in college at Alabama, but this is the NFL.
It's the big leagues.
Now, this is a multiple-time, Super Bowl champion in Ben Roethlisberger.
Take nothing away from him.
Versus a baby, theoretically, in A.J. McCarron. So as much as I want Marvin Lewis to get that first playoff win, I just don't see him doing it with his backup quarterback. Now, I could be wrong. That's why they play the game. But Pittsburgh with Big Ben and Antonio Brown is going to be too much for Cincinnati. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough. Now, I could be completely wrong. But I have Pittsburgh winning this one in a shootout. 32-28.
Whoa, yeah, that's a great prediction of a game. I hope it turns out that way because that's high scoring, probably some big hits, a lot of animosity like we said earlier. Saturday can't get here quick enough for me, man. I'm excited about the AFC side of things.
Yeah, wildcard weekend gets kicked off on Saturday. Again, Houston Texans hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. That's at 4:20. Check your local listings for that channel. And then the second game, the nightcap in that AFC, man, big time matchup. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals, man. So, what more can you say, Pierre? It's wild card weekend. We've just previewed the AFC portion of it. We're going to take this commercial break. Our producer is doing that finger swirl, which means wrap it up. Play these commercials. Take care of your business. Pay a couple bills. Eat some popcorn. Do what you have to do. We'll be right back on the All Things Sport podcast on Spreaker Radio.
Thank you for listening to the All Things Sport podcast with Daimeon Banks and Pierre Banks. Be sure to check out the In My Humble YouTube channel for all your sporting needs.
This is Daimeon Banks. Thank you for listening to the All Things Sport podcast. You can also catch me on the Puff TV Morning Combo on Blog Talk Radio every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m. Call 347-677-0956 and I'll give you Sports by Daimeon.
Pierre Banks here, thanking you all for listening to the All Things Sport podcast. Please subscribe for much more of the show. Also, join myself and Rudy Mondragon for In My Humble, The Split Decision, where we discuss all things boxing and what is just our humble opinion on the In My Humble YouTube channel.
Join us every Friday for the All Things Sport podcast with Daimeon Banks and Pierre Banks on Spreaker Radio.
The All Things Sport podcast.
We go back like spinal cords and car seats.
With Daimeon Banks and Pierre Banks on Spreaker Radio.
Welcome back to the All Things Sport podcast. And Pierre, we just talked about the wild card weekend matchups on the AFC side. Now, we all know that the Broncos and the Patriots have the first round bye. So we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs visiting the Houston Texans and the Steelers making that trip to Cincinnati. Now we're going to get into the NFC side of things. First matchup of the day on the NFC wildcard, man. Pretty good matchup if you ask me, man. The Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson, they're going to travel to the bitter cold. Temperature's supposed to be in the below zero range in Minnesota, taking on AP all day. Adrian Peterson and the Minnesota Vikings.
I think that Minnesota comes into the game with a false sense of confidence. You and I spoke earlier about the job that Green Bay did in their last game with Minnesota may have played themselves into a matchup with the Washington Redskins and allowed the Vikings to host the Seahawks, which is bad news for the Vikings. When you talk about the Seattle Seahawks, you talk about a team led by Russell Wilson, the quarterback who comes into the NFL playoffs playing better than any other quarterback in the league. I mean, Russell Wilson is red hot. And if we had a top 5 today, he would be number 1 on my list.
Minus Cam Newton, because we all know who the MVP of the NFL is.
I mean, if we was doing the top 5 today, I would base it on a couple different things. Number one, on how they're playing right now. And right now, Russell Wilson is playing better than every other quarterback.
How could you? Well, Cam Newton lost one game all season, and he's the reason why the Panthers lost one game. But that's another debate entirely. Now, you know I love Russell Wilson more than Sierra loves Russell Wilson. So I can't get enough of that young man. He's went to NC State. We all know I'm living that Pag life. I love NC State. Russell Wilson went to NC State. I love him. But let's be honest, he's not going to be in the MVP. Cam Newton is, but I digress.
I'm not saying he's going to win the MVP. I'm just saying that he's playing better than every other player in his position.
Understandably, but getting back to what we're talking about, he is playing out of his mind right now. You lose Jimmy Graham, so what? Luke Wilson stepped up. You throw in touchdowns to Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse. Marshawn Lynch hasn't played in 7 games, man. They've been through 3 different running backs, man. Russell Wilson has been the stabilizing factor for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. That defense has stepped up. You know, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Sherman, the Legion of Boom is back in full effect, man. KJ Wright, great linebacker, Bobby Wagner, Cliff Averill gives you good pressure up front on the defensive side of the ball. So I like the Seahawks, man, but don't discount Teddy Bridgewater and the Minnesota Vikings, man. Bridgewater's not going to wow you with his numbers, but he's steady, poised beyond his years, man. And all he has to do is, you know, turn around and hand the ball to Adrian Peterson. Now, I know Seattle has a good defense, but Adrian Peterson is Adrian Peterson. Yet another rushing title, over 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, and they're not flashy, but they get the job done in Minnesota.
Oh, absolutely. And I would be remiss to think that Minnesota wasn't going to come to play ball, to think that Minnesota wouldn't have a game plan coming into Sunday, to think that they were not going to be competitive. The Minnesota Vikings have been playing steady ball all season, really with the exception of the first game where they just looked god-awful against the San Francisco 49ers. This team has been pretty steady going along. Their defense, not the greatest in the world, but they aren't the worst. They're probably about middle of the road, but they play defense well enough in that NFC North division to win it. They play well enough to be competitive in every game because, as you said, they've got the league's leading rusher on the other side. And then Teddy Bridgewater, all he's done is gotten better from year 1 to year 2. And I thought the addition of Mike Wallace would bring a different wrinkle to that offense and would stretch the field vertically with Adrian Peterson in the backfield. But Teddy Bridgewater has found a number 1 receiver in young Stephon Diggs.
Pierre, again, Bridgewater, he will not wow you with the stats, but one thing he will wow you with is just his poise, man. That guy plays.
He's heady too.
He plays like a wily veteran, and I mean, you have to be able to manage, you know, for lack of a better term, games, you know, in the playoffs. You know, you have to make plays when you need to make plays. Now, defensively, Minnesota, they're not great, like you said, but they do have Sharif Floyd up front, Everson Griffin, 10.5 sacks, man, can give you some rush off the edge, you know. But one thing that I will say about Minnesota, they play to their strength, and their strength is Adrian Peterson. It's going to be strength against strength because most teams can't run the ball on Seattle, and we'll see on Sunday if Minnesota can do just that.
I mean, it's not most teams can't run the ball against Seattle. They got the number one rushing defense in all of the NFL. Nobody can run the ball against this team.
Well, the Panthers found a way to run the ball on Seattle, but that's another story.
Earlier in the season, we're talking about a completely different team at this point. Again, we're talking about how teams and players are playing.
I mean, so it can be done.
I'm
just saying it can be done if you scout them properly, find a couple wrinkles, and find things that you can do to be able to gain an advantage running the ball. Then Minnesota will have a chance. If they can't run the ball, I don't see any way that Minnesota is going to beat Seattle.
And when I say that Seattle is a different team right now, yeah, the Panthers were able to run the ball against them, but that's because Seattle's offense wasn't playing that well back then. Now Seattle's offense is playing lights out, and they're putting a lot of pressure on their opponents, and so it puts the defense in a different position. It feels so much different to play when you know that your offense is playing well as a defender. It's so much different to play from ahead than it is from behind, trying to exert all of your energy just to catch up to the other team and try to make a play on defense because your offense isn't producing. That's not where Seattle is right now. It's where they were in the past, where they were when Carolina came into town. But right now, again, completely different team. So if the Minnesota Vikings think they're just going to turn around and hand the ball off to 28 and come out with a victory, they're going to be sadly mistaken because that Seattle defense is going to be king on him. Pete Carroll will have a game plan ready for him. And then if they take away Stephon Diggs, then you just leave Teddy Bridgewater, Mike Wallace, a shell of what he was in the past to try to beat that great Legion of Boom defense.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One thing that Minnesota may be able to do is, if they can't run the ball, is throw to their tight end. They have a pretty good tight end, out of Notre Dame. If they throw to him, they may have a chance. Like you said, Stephon Diggs is the Vikings' leading receiver. And that's only at around 700 some odd yards a game. So it looks like a mismatch on paper, but you never know. That's why they play the games. Minnesota can come out on fire on Saturday. You never know. But you and I spoke previously. We felt like Green Bay not unpurposely tanked that game so they could play, the Redskins. So Seattle had to play Minnesota. But, I'm not going to say that, but it could happen. But my prediction for this Seattle and Minnesota game, I got Seattle winning this one, man. I mean, going away. I'm going 34-14 Seattle.
I don't think it'll be that lopsided. I think the Vikings will be in the game. I think they'll play decent defense. I think they'll try to control the clock. But I do have Seattle winning by the score of 30-16.
30-16. Sounds about right. It's going to be a 2-score game. The only way that Minnesota's going to be able to keep this game close is if they turn Seattle over. If Seattle makes mistakes, fumbles, i.e. fumbles, interceptions, things of that nature. But, Stephen Hauschka is a pretty good place kicker, much like Blair Walsh is for Minnesota. So that's pretty much a wash. Defensively, Seattle has the edge. Quarterback-wise, Seattle has the edge. Offensively, Seattle has the edge. The only edge that Minnesota has is Adrian Peterson. But will he be able to run the ball against Seattle? That remains to be seen.
Absolutely. And Daimeon, that brings us into the second wild card matchup of the day on the NFC side, that is. And we'll go to DC for this one. The Kirk Cousins-led Washington Redskins taking on the Green Bay Packers there in the second game. And when you look at these two teams, it seems to be two teams that are moving in completely opposite directions. I mean, you had Green Bay started out like a house of fire, and Aaron Rodgers was playing lights out. You didn't think it was going to be that way with him losing his leading receiver at the beginning of the season, but it turned out like that at first. Then teams started keying in on him a little bit. Aaron Rodgers started not playing as well, starting to feel a little bit of pressure, not relaxing as his mantra is. And now you have a team just barely holding on. They're still trying to find themselves offensively. You got a head coach who took over the reins as far as play calling goes. That hadn't worked particularly well. They still struggled the past 2 games. And then on the opposite end of that, you've got a team